that a lot of this data seems to be the people in the industry don't have direct access. It's behind gates that industry needs to purchase their way to get through, if they even can.
Right.
Seems like it's been a missed opportunity. Are there any places besides, like, say, putting cookies on a website where the industry can do a better job of getting data directly from fans and utilizing it?
And I mean, this part makes me really upset. I don't know if you can tell, like, it really breaks my heart that independent management companies, like smaller artists, like, are unable to get access to their own data in a scalable way, because frankly, it is expensive to build ETLs to ingest the data. It is expensive to have a data analyst like clean the data and then make it useful for the decision makers like you. So that's why it's historically, like, large corporations are the ones that are able to build these tech stacks and actually, like, utilize the data. Unfortunately, like, the only thing that I can think for the indies, the independent management companies out there, to be able to scale the data is just to export the data out of Spotify, put it into a Google Drive, build your database in Google Sheets. Like, that's the only thing that I can think of that you guys could use, which is really kind of is what it is.
I don't even know if Google Sheets do pivot tables, but
It does.
Okay, good. About half the audience just said, "I'm out now." He said pivot tables. I'm out. Yeah. So, Randy, what tools are you using to aggregate all of these various data sources, or are you just looking at, like Bill's talking about, having a cupboard where you just pull the ingredients that you need?
Yeah, Vivian kind of nailed it. Me being one of those indie managers, I'm just kind of hacking my way through, logging into each individual platform, digging through it when I'm working on a project that I need information on, and just trying to extrapolate whatever data I can from my years of experience of working in the industry to decide what the best actions are to take. So unfortunately, I don't have, these great stacks that are going to give me this amazing reports. But at the same time, I've found that, thankfully, most of my artists are involved with, like, say, a Live Nation or an AEG when it comes to touring. And I open up our platform, let them pixel our pages and do everything else they can to help track our fans, and work hand in hand with the promoters. And then I'll work hand in hand with the labels, and in the same way with merch companies. And ideally, if I'm working with the right partners who are managing their data correctly, it's not as bad of a situation as Vivian was describing, but it is frustrating that I can't do more. And this is something I don't know where everyone else stands in this group, but I absolutely tend to choose partners based on how they manage our data. And, obviously security of our fans' data, but beyond that, how I can view it and how they act on it is extremely important. And again, I mentioned this earlier in the call, I work with one merch company for one of my clients who I don't want to name because they're good friends of mine, but I don't have access to a dashboard even to see what our sales are. And it's a major company that's out there today, and it's mind-blowing to see something like that still today. And that one's based on relationship that I wish it wasn't, but the scenario's there and it needs to happen. And I know for a fact that my client is seeing less sales because of it. But it's a decision that my client and I made together, that some things are more important than the data, unfortunately.
Randy, do you have an estimation of the discrepancy in sales based on the platform? Like, do you think you're losing 20%, or do you think it could be as high as 50%?
It's so hard to put a percentage on it, because some of it is just becoming unmotivated to work more to promote something when you don't know if you succeeded or not. So it's very difficult to know why you have a win or why you have a loss on something if you can't see any information at all. So it's so hard to even give you a percentage, because I just have so little information.
Randy, just to follow up on that, are you expressing this to your clients? Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and in this scenario, the company that will remain nameless over the call is working very quickly to rectify the situation and is actually asking me to be a beta tester of their platform they're finally rolling out that should have been done sooner. And it's, you know, a multi-billion-dollar corporation that is involved in this merch company. So it's not a small-time merch company by any stretch.
I can echo Randy's sentiments because I've had a very similar situation in the years past. Sounds almost identical, and it was a big reason why we moved on.
Yeah, I mean, staying on that merch topic, for whatever reason, and I think some of it comes from where the merch business began years ago, and the original leaders of merch companies were all the bootleggers who were in the parking lot in the 70s and 60s selling bootleg merchandise and ripping off the bands. Then they realized they could make more money partnering with the bands, but also ripping off the bands at the same time. And these people are still a lot of the gatekeepers, although it's beginning to change over the last couple of years. And they were incredibly resistant to proper sales data being available in the merchandise industry. So they're behind even the recorded music industry in sharing information with their clients. And Shopify changed the game ultimately, where people realized how much they could see. But it's taken time for an entire segment of the industry to update. But it's a lot closer than it was 2 years ago.
Mike, in my head, I'm thinking it'd be awesome if there was some sort of like music industry data lake where all of these various streams can all go to and people could extract what they need when they need. But just from a manager's point of view, how are you de-siloing all these different data sources from the record label to the merch to the social media manager, all that sort of thing? Are you able to get these different people to collaborate at all with the data?
Yeah, we are actually. And I mean, I think that's part of the key to something like Ryan or Randy or myself who manage artists. That's part of our job with where the data is at this point. You know, I've got to be that central piece that knows what I can get, what I can't get, what I need, and then who needs all of that information. I love the idea of the lake. I mean, you know, when Ryan first came up with his industry email, which has continued to develop and is such a resource, I think that's a start. It's somebody like that taking these points. But as you can see, there's so many. And, one of the things that I've always wanted, right, when SoundScan was such a big thing, as Ryan was alluding to, I was managing a lot of bands that weren't selling CDs yet, but we were selling merchandise. So I always hoped that we could develop something called Merch Scan. But inevitably, that requires getting the data, which is becoming more and more available, though it's not nearly as available. And then, compiling it. And then how do you get everybody to kind of go to the same lake, right? So, hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. Ryan, sort of to build on that, I mean, you've got a long-term view and a long-term data collection plan. As an artist manager, a lot of that long-term data is much more valuable than it probably is for, say, the new guy that you just hired to do the social media campaign for. So what is your perspective and how do you collect, and is there value in that old data that you're able to utilize?
And to jump off from something Mike just mentioned and something that Vivian was talking about and all of was brought up a little while ago, and you brought up, it was very cost prohibitive to get access to this data. I remember, starting out as a manager, the labels that the various bands I represented were signed to, and not even all of them, but some of them would send me our sound scans every week, like individualized for the band. But that was it. And I, being somebody who was just interested in general, and those numbers didn't really mean much to me if I didn't have any context, if I didn't understand, like, okay, Bleeding Through did 19,000 first week, but if I don't know what Every Time I Die and Under Oath are selling, like, who cares? Like, because I don't know if that's good or bad, So then you're like, well, how do I get a SoundScan account? That'd be fun to be able to go in there and poke around. It was so expensive. I mean, like I can only assume by design, right, to be a gatekeeper, to make sure that the layman didn't have access to that information. And I always was frustrated by that, and that's continued a little bit with BuzzAngle and Music Connect and some of these services that have come along to try to replace what SoundScan was doing. So the service that I'm providing, and this is something that I've realized, Bill, and one of the reasons why I thought it was so important to have Bill join us on this Zoom thing, he's a data nerd, even more so than I am. Like, it's someone that just loves all of these emerging technologies and keeps track of them. And he's constantly telling me about productivity tools. He was doing a productivity podcast at one point with another friend of ours. So he's the first person I think about when it comes to where do I go to get this stuff and what can I find. However, in my experience, the vast majority of people who subscribe to my newsletter, even the ones who are aware of all the tools that Bill is aware of, they either don't have the time or won't make the time or don't have the interest to actually use them. So they're not logging into all these different platforms and tailoring it and typing stuff in and looking things up. They seem to prefer having someone like me sitting around and doing that and assembling it all into an easy to read format that's just the basic facts for the week of, like, here's a bunch of bands and records and videos and tracks and social media accounts that you care about. Here's kind of where they all stand this week. And certainly for managers, labels, that do their own internal stuff, in terms of trying to reach and develop their own audiences, they'll continue to do that. But going back to your thing about a lake where we could have all these tributaries, arriving. Yeah, no one's really figured that out. And I don't know that there will be a monolithic thing because, much like Vivian brought up with Spotify kind of pulling their data from Music Connect, like, everyone's so tribal and everyone's so proprietary that it's going to be hard to get everyone under an umbrella like you used to have with Nielsen and SoundScan. And that's probably good. There's probably a lot of reasons why it's good to not have a monolithic gatekeeper of data. But I do think that there will always be a need for something like the small service that I'm providing, which is grabbing a bunch of that information that makes sense together and contextualizing it and, putting it really plainly in one place to look at.
We just need another tier, which involves your commentary. And I don't mean that. I don't mean that in jest. I mean that.
No, Mike's been saying that to me for years. I'm just.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Well, Vivian,